Hi there. I'm so happy you're here. Here's what you'll gain by listening to the very last second of this conversation with Sarah Sindelius and Kristen Briggs of The Ability Challenge. Through my conversation with Sarah and Kristen, you'll learn why effective special education requires a systemic shift from a deficit based, compliance focused approach to one that presumes competence, centers diverse learners, and provides all students access to grade level content through intentional support systems. You'll leave the conversation understanding why focusing on Tier 1 instruction is essential, why student needs should drive systems design, and why data analysis must be precise and action oriented. Stay with us. I'm so excited to have you join our conversation. This is Solutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies, the podcast that extends education beyond the classroom. A show that offers educators and caregivers strategies to try right away and ensure every student receives the inspiration and support they need to thrive. I am Olivia Wall, and I am so happy to welcome my guests today, Sarah Sindelius and Kristen Briggs. Let me tell you a little bit about Sarah and Kristen. Sarah is a lawyer with more than 15 years of experience implementing strategy and policy on behalf of our nation's youth. Sarah is the founder of The Ability Challenge, which offers partnership and support to schools and districts working to improve learning outcomes for students with disabilities. Kristen Briggs leads The Ability Challenge's programming development. Kristen joined the Ability Challenge team with over a decade of experience as a special education teacher, a school and network leader, and most recently as a nonprofit director. Sarah and Kristen, I am grateful for your friendships. I am grateful for our thought partnership that we've been developing over time. And I said to both of you, you have to be guests on the podcast because your experience and the strategies you have to offer are vast and incredibly helpful and inspiring to every listener that I have. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yes, I'm so excited to jump into our conversation. And I asked both of you beforehand to have a little bit of a nugget of research or a researcher that you think of often when it comes to the work you're doing. Sarah, can you start us off?
Sure. So I actually thought a lot about this because if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, I post a lot of research and I always have quite more questions than answers after I read research. So I've chosen to highlight some of the work from NCLD, this National Center for Learning Disabilities, because of two particular pieces of research that they've put out. One was their recent report on the state of learning differences. And the reason I loved it was because I went to their release and they talked about the process behind the research and how they did it. And they really worked with young people. It's all about young people and the transition to adulthood. And they talked about how they asked for young people to provide insight into the questions they were asking and the methods for collecting the information. And they really tried to use the people who they were soliciting information from in the design of the study, which I thought was just really cool. And then the other research that I quote all the time is a 2019 piece that they put out called Learning Forward Together, where they really looked at the state of the 1 in 5 students with disabilities in our country and the way in which they're experiencing school and how well prepared teachers feel about supporting them. And so those are two very different pieces, but both from NCLD.
Awesome. I will put links to both of those in the show notes as well for listeners. Yeah. Kristen, how about you?
Yeah, so this is a fun fact about me is I lean more on my experience and what I've seen firsthand. I will say that I don't tend to cite research beyond like the statistics we know about the representation of Black and Brown children in particularly in special education, largely because I think like I've lived it and I've seen it firsthand. And I think that at times I understand the desire and rationale for being able to back things with research, but I think we also have to be really thoughtful about over intellectualizing things at times and seeking to almost like want to I'm just gonna leave it as like over intellectualized sometimes. I will say that the study that Sarah cited, the Forward Together study, resonates deeply with the experience that I've had. In particular, like seeing students across various school settings and working with teachers in general education as colleagues, also coaching teachers as a school leader and in the nonprofit world. Because what I see many times is that teachers don't feel prepared. They often feel like special educators have some secret sauce that we're hiding. And what ends up happening is they discover that, like, actually, we're doing a lot of the things that you already do. It's just the level of intentionality that we're using and the different types of data that we're looking at to help us make these really strategic instructional decisions.
Kristen, I'll say I'm really happy you're part of this conversation because of your lived experience as a special education teacher, especially with the groups of children that you've served and been an advocate for. And so I think it may not be a particular research study or a researcher, but your knowledge that goes far beyond compliance metrics will be incredibly helpful in this conversation. So I'm grateful. Sarah, I need you to take us to the moment or the series of events that led you to the creation, and it served as a catalyst for the Ability Challenge. Take us there with you.
Okay, well, so I think it goes back. I actually came to special education first as a lawyer, and ended up sort of through the path of being a lawyer, landing in the New York City Department of Education, District 79, which is the alternative school district. And for various reasons, they had been sued for their alleged inability to implement IDEA. But when you think about implementing a law like IDEA in a non-traditional educational setting, like a school on Rikers Island or a school in a juvenile detention facility, they were dealing with some really big issues around how do you actually do that.
Yeah.
And so when I ended up working there, I really was able to dig into what does this law mean? How do we apply it in a setting that doesn't look like a traditional school? And that was an incredibly meaningful opportunity for me. One of the things that I took away from that experience was that often the students who needed the most support were getting the least amount of support because of the systems that they had been subjected to. At the same time that I was experiencing that, I was also seeing members of my own family going through the special education process for their children or their child. And I saw these very two stark differences in how access to opportunities and access to resources could really impact what is a challenging experience for all families or for most families. But I saw my family able to immediately go into action and get the young people what they needed. And I saw these other families or students, without knowing much about the background and trying not to make too many assumptions about it, just feeling marginalized upon marginalized from the various systems that were not serving them. And that juxtaposition of seeing those two realities at the same time was a moment for me. It wasn't until much later that I actually started the organization, but I think back to those times, seeing those things at the same time, which ultimately led me to the space of saying, if we're helping schools and school districts do this work better, what does a school support organization actually do? And how do we make sure that we're, as educators and leaders, providing the right resources in the right places to get kids, regardless of their backgrounds, to get them what they need. Because just because a child has a disability does not mean that they should be getting anything different. They may need additional supports, but it shouldn't be less than. It should be able to be tailored to what they need. And so I really started the Ability Challenge after having those two experiences, and then going down the path of consulting and seeing how special education is implemented across different settings.
Well, but something you helped me better understand that was not on my radar like it should have been is the difference between visible and invisible disabilities. So can you speak to that a little bit too?
Sure. I think we think that special education is something totally different, that there is this mysterious or mystical set of skills that a special education teacher graduates their program with, and that they're just able to meet the needs of all of the students who come through the building. And whether or not a child has a visible disability, think traditionally, you can see when somebody comes into a building in a wheelchair or with some sort of physical manifestation of a disability, versus the invisible disabilities, which are, you can't see them when you look at a child, but you can definitely, they still impact learning in different ways. Um, those two different types of disabilities, schools are required to serve everybody who walks through the door, right? And so educators need to be experts in all of those different areas.
It's a
And the
lot.
one thing that I will say is that on both sides, I think we are dealing with challenges in mindsets and assumptions about what students can and can't do. On the one hand, with the visible disabilities, oftentimes we see um, assumptions being made about what students can or can't do based on what people are looking at.
Yes.
And then with invisible disabilities, we're oftentimes overlooking some of what children actually need because they can't see the manifestations of those things.
Yeah,
And
it's
very
fascinating.
complicated.
It is complicated. And then, Kristen, I know your work when it comes to directing the special education programs. What are you finding that schools could do better to support in your vast experience?
Yeah. So I have a couple of thoughts. One, I want to start with just acknowledging that schools are working incredibly hard. I I don't think we can ever overstate how hard people are working to meet the needs of kids, especially just, I mean, what we all have lived through in the past 5 years. And so that's just important to stamp. Uh, I would say one thing that comes up, and I'm going to build off of something Sarah was just speaking to with the invisible disabilities, right? The point I would add is, or the ways in which they manifest are not accurately attributed to the disabilities. And so one of the big things that we hear, especially in the past, the post-COVID era, is there's this influx in behaviors. We just don't know how to navigate behaviors and all of these things. And um, also hearing, student, the needs are just so great and kids are just so far behind. And what I'm seeing, and I believe this is a trend that's being noticed by a number of people in education, is there's this attempt to try to like tier 2 and 3 ourselves out of a tier 1 challenge,
Oh,
right?
it's such, yeah.
So if I'm a kiddo who may have a disability classification of OHI for ADHD, or I have a specific learning disability, and I'm in class and I'm overstimulated, or I'm not stimulated at all, or I do not have an entry point because I don't understand the directions,
Yes.
right? Or I'm trying to do an activity, but I'm 3 grade levels behind in reading, and that barrier hasn't been addressed. That may manifest as I'm the student who's quiet, and because I'm quiet, nobody comes and checks on me. Or it may manifest as I'm about to get up and walk around the room and go do whatever I want to do because that's just where I am. And for no fault, right? I think it's just like people don't know what they don't know. There's a need to build the knowledge and skill of educators, leaders, interventionists, etc., around really understanding the root of behaviors and how to address those things, right? We talk about it organizationally, we say like separating the behavior from the student. So it's not Kristen's a bad kid. Kristen's engaging in a challenging behavior. We have to understand why.
Right.
The other thing I see is there's a struggle with navigating staffing. We know that there is a staffing crisis pretty much when it comes to education. And we hear a lot of schools like, we just don't have the staff. We just don't have the staff. I need more people. And this is something that I learned as a school leader when it came to programming kids and scheduling kids. And we did it at a high school level. So my high school folks understand what I am talking about. Scheduling in high school is not for the faint of heart. Where we often support folks is, how do you actually start with your student needs first? Let's not look at your adult limitations. Let's look at what your student needs require. And so if that means getting out, I remember being at CEC years ago, and there was someone from Charlotte Mecklenburg, and she talked about how anytime she had a principal who said, I don't have staff, she's like, I went to their buildings, we put anchor charts on the walls, every kid's service got posted. So I have yet to experience a principal who can't program all their kids. And so it's getting folks to kind of shift their perspective and their mindset to think about, like, center what your kids need first and let that tell the story. And so you might find that you still have a staffing shortage, but where you felt like you had a 10-person shortfall, we're actually talking about like 1.5. That's a whole lot more easy to not easy, but you can find some pathways for 1.5.
Right. Yeah.
Compared to 10.
Yeah. I want to just make sure, because I have caregivers that tune in as well. So I want to go back to something you said. They're tier 2 or tier 3ing their way out of tier 1. So that's speaking to the multi-tiered systems of support that school districts lean on. And that tier 1 support is happening in the classroom from the general ed teacher. And it's interesting, I'm actually being interviewed for another podcast this afternoon around response to intervention and that need for more sustained tier 1 support. And what I'm finding, Kristen, is that the gen ed teachers need more tools to do exactly what you were just speaking to. And that sadly, most of the professional learning that I see happening in school districts, it doesn't have everyone around the table at the same time learning from each other. So there's training for special education teachers, for RTI teachers, interventionists, there's professional learning for general ed teachers, but it's not around the kids enough, So I think it's just fascinating. And yeah, the idea of we have to focus on tier 1.
Yeah, and I'm shaking my head a lot because I've worked in the nonprofit and like curriculum world, and yeah, it was very much so like, and never do the worlds meet. It's like, well, where are your special educators? Because they need to know this. And the thing, I'm a special education teacher to my core, and our work rests on a solid foundation of sound universal instruction. When you do an IEP, you have to answer a question, and it's asking you, are you sure that this child's disability is not a result of a lack of quality tier 1 instruction? And there's a number of criteria that determine if you answer, like how you answer that question. Like, well, their teachers are all highly qualified and they're certified. There's something deeper there for me too that you have to think about when it comes to, like, did we do everything? Like, have we provided them with that quality instruction? And then to the point you made around folks needing more tools, and they need support on how to effectively use them. People want a strategy, 15 ways Sunday. Just give me this strategy. And we could lay out open, like, here's 50.
Yeah.
And if you haven't gotten the professional learning, but also the coaching and feedback on how to effectively implement those things, review data to see how well they're working and how you can tune them, it can feel like, oh, I did this thing that didn't work, I need another strategy. I've done this, it didn't work, I need another strategy. And that's not a knock to people. It's like, it's a human reaction, I think, to say, like, I tried that thing, I keep trying it, or I did it and it worked for a month and it stopped. Yeah.
Well, and so that's why, Sarah, the Thrive framework, I think is critical. So I'd love for you to explain what is the Thrive framework, and then also, how does it go against the idea of that deficit based mindset that is traditional that we see all the time in special ed?
Yeah. Well, so Thrive is our stake in the ground around quality special education programming. We look at, there are 5 core elements, everything from a culture of inclusion, student-centered curriculum and instruction, um, to meaningful family partnerships and systems and supports. And then we got special ed right in the middle there. And it looks beyond just, a traditional special education model to say, if a whole school is doing this work well, what does that look like? And so when you ask about how it goes in a different approach, one of the things that I have found really effective is to think about the different types of constructs that we use to talk about special education. And so if you think about a traditional medical model, which is sort of how IDEA, our big law, is written, it treats disability as something that needs to be diagnosed and fixed. And for the people who are just listening, I'm making a lot of quotes, air quotes
Air
here.
quotes are happening. Yeah.
Right. And so you have to find out, what is the disability? What is the problem? You wait until a child is, in many cases, behind, and then you provide an intervention and support and fix until they no longer need that. And that is sort of the way that IDEA is written. What Thrive is more centered on is what some folks call the social model, which is to say that we need to build systems and supports that are from the ground up, that support young people, no matter what their needs are. And so we look at is there compliance? Do they have really great IEPs? Are they having the right kinds of meetings? Things that are traditionally special education focused. But we also look at things that what Kristen was talking about. Does every lesson have a clear learning outcome? Can every child understand the directions that they're being asked? Are teachers checking for understanding in ways that are additive to the learning and really not testing into a particular area of challenge for a kid because of their disability? And we look at all of those things, and Thrive really sets the vision for what we expect from high quality programming. And so we use Thrive as we work with all of our school partners to say, let's get closer to that, and let's think about how we do that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I so appreciate it's a community effort. It's so collaborative and collective, and it's all centered on the child and celebrating and lifting up. And I appreciate also the background of the way IDEA has traditionally worked and how this really is a fresh take. It's a fresh perspective that I know both of you believe in so strongly.
Yeah. I have one other thing to add, which is that we really take a systems level approach, which I think differentiates Thrive from other models,
I agree.
because we recognize that the systems that our schools are founded on were not designed for the students that we're talking about. They are much more centered around that's one size fits all. Let's teach to the traditional or average child, and then retrofit or figure out how we're going to meet the needs of everybody else. And so the reason that we have Thrive and the reason that we center Thrive in all of our work is to say, we actually need to start from the beginning and put the most diverse learner in the center, and that it is a systems solution to a systems problem. And so it really highlights mindsets, knowledge, and practices that we as a school community can implement together.
That's so well said. And then, Kristen, I continue to think of districts that are just getting by focusing heavily on the compliance metrics. So yeah, another skill set of yours comes down to, like, really, how do you know something's effective? How do you know if a program is showing the results that we want to see and that children are thriving? I love even the word thrive. I've moved in my language away from struggling to striving. So I think that idea of like we're reaching toward all children thriving and growing and blossoming as humans. Kristen, what's the data that shows us that way beyond compliance metrics?
So there's a couple of things that come to mind there. So I think special education to start, right? I had gone to a rights law training again years ago. And the way that the facilitator explained the importance of evaluation testing, um, coupled with correction. It wasn't rights law. It was a school psychologist in Philadelphia. And I'm not going to call her name out, but she was brilliant. She explained to me the role of evaluative testing. And she said, every 3 years, we have an opportunity to give kids an apples to apples assessment. And it's going to tell us if what we've put in place for them every year between those 2 points is actually doing what we needed to do. She said, so our job in the annual reviews is to say, how are they doing with the services and supports that we've put in place against what they need to do in school, right? Because when we think about IDEA, I always say it this way, there's 2 purposes of special education: to remove the barriers presented by my disability and give me access to grade level content. What I see in practice is folks often kind of lose that second part, and the remove the barriers becomes synonymous with give me intervention to close my gaps, which can be a part of it. But we also have to be paying attention to, one, if there are gaps that I need to close because that's how my disability is showing up, look at my growth data. Look at how am I actually moving and making progress, and get a bit more granular than, oh, I moved from second grade level to a third grade level. What did I do? Did I strengthen my ability to do certain blends? Did I strengthen how I navigate certain challenges in multisyllabic words? Am I doing better at navigating like R-controlled words? I'm riffing, right? But get really granular. And I think what can be intimidating for teachers is they're like, one, that just sounds like a whole lot of work. And 2, I might not always have the information that I really think I need. Start with what you have. Start with what you have and ask more questions. It may take time on the front end, but what it allows you to do is be more precise. So versus saying I have a kid on a second grade level and I have to move them to a third grade level because they're in 7th grade, that can mean a ton of things. Right? Take a look at what you do know. What are the trends you see in their work? There are different protocols that we use with partners around data analysis that I think people can replicate easily. The other piece that, and I'm saying this because I'm a high school teacher too, is we have to think about how am I doing in relation to grade level expectations. So I can have a disability that manifests as me being grade levels behind, but that doesn't mean that accessing grade level content should be off the table for me, right? We talk about this through the notion of like removing barriers. If I have a disability that manifests in reading, every task in grade level content isn't necessarily assessing my ability to read grade level content. So if that's the barrier, how do you address that, but then still give me access to the thinking tasks? And so asking teachers, I'm being very specific and going in and out, but asking teachers to, one, start with what you have. Ask very clear questions. So the protocol we use is what, so what, now what? Very clearly, what is this data telling you flat out? Don't make predictions, don't infer. You are just saying flat out, what is the data showing you? It is showing me that they answered 3 questions about this wrong. It is showing me that they struggled to do this math problem. Cool. So what? What does that mean for them? Well, that means that they're going to struggle when it comes to doing this concept, or that means that they are not identifying the appropriate cognitive strategy. Now what? Because that so what is helping me be even more precise with my now what planning. Because now what is, so what do you do about it? But there's ways to do it. And I'm saying this more broadly in terms of like not calling out specific, like use this assessment or use this assessment, because we use a number of them. But it's the practice that you use with the information that's in front of you that helps you really strengthen your precision and practice, if that makes sense.
It does. And I continue to go back. I recently interviewed Juliana Tapper, and she has a book that recently came out. It's 6 through 12 math interventions for students. And there was a moment in the book, I got a lump in my throat. Like I got really overwhelmed because she was talking about, as a math interventionist, she really had not expected ever to expose her 6th through 12th grade students to on grade level content until she had an administrator come into her building and say, no, you will expose students to grade level content. And she didn't know how she was going to do it. But there was a moment when she gave her group of kids the materials that all other students were using. And she said they were shocked, like, we're going to use the same book. And she was like, yeah. And they were like, oh. And they sat up a little bit straighter. The reason I'm saying this, I think so much teachers want to do right by kids. Most teachers that I work with wake up every morning of like, get it, I am going to hang out with kids today and life could not be better, because that's what we do. And I think sometimes we don't check our biases, and we need to just know, what are our expectations for students that have labels attributed to them? And we need to shake that off and say our kids can do magical things if we set the bar for them. And what Juliana said, very similar to what you were just saying, Kristen, you've got to know. You have to be so precise at what they can do, so you know how to build backwards or forwards from that, scaffolding wise. If this is the grade level, what moments do they need with me, steps on a ladder, to get to that standard? So if sometimes kids that don't believe in themselves yet, they may have low self-efficacy, we need to believe in them first, and then you'll see them rise. So, or see them thrive, I should say. So I think that's big.
Yeah, I would offer, there's a refrain I use all the time. Kids will meet whatever bar you set for them, low or high. Right? And I love how you set it around like checking our own biases, because I don't, more often than not, it's like, I don't think this is a malicious intent.
No, it's not.
Right? But I have a very dear friend of mine who she's like, but malicious intent is one piece of it, but sometimes it's like, we actually need to be more intentional. Right? So you don't necessarily have to have malicious intent, but how intentional are you around understanding in the exposure? And the other piece that comes up is, and this is a note to administrators and leaders, we have to be ready, willing, and able to support teachers, because that intentionality and that curiosity and all of those things can also surface areas of growth. And that can be really intimidating as a teacher. I feel like, well, wait a second, because maybe they can, but I don't really know. And I think you said the woman you're speaking to said, like, I actually don't know how to do that. That's intimidating as a teacher. It's my job to, right? It's like my job to know. And it's a leader's job. It's our jobs as leaders to ensure that we have your back, and we are giving you the resources that you need in order to build that skill, because our kids need, and they can do it. I've seen it. I've seen kids come alive. When you put a text in front of them that they're just like, wait a second, we get to read that too? Yeah. They do. I love how you said that. Their back gets straighter, because it does. They do. Like it shows.
It does. And Sarah, I know what I've really just loved of our conversations, you feed my soul with your research. Every post you put on LinkedIn, I jump in and I read, because I know you read it, and you are a curious human like I am. You ask lots and lots of questions. So I think moving forward in 2025 with the state of the world right now, what are your hopes? Let's wrap our conversation. And Kristen, start thinking about this too. Like, what are your hopes? What emerging trends are you seeing? Where do you see the ability challenge, not just in 2025, but moving forward? Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I mean, I think my hope is that every child can go to a school that we say we want the schools, all the schools that we work with, or all of the schools, to be anti-ableist, in that they are actively trying to break down those barriers, and seek to support every child that walks through their door. We actually set a big goal around it. So we want to work, or help to work with, schools that are going to support 1 million more students with disabilities by 2045. We're going to get there. But I think when we really think about like what it comes down to from a human perspective, what we're talking about here is that people start from a place of presuming competence. And that, from the ability challenges perspective, we are working with folks to be able to support them in those mindsets with knowledge and support with practices on how to get there. But that is really the starting place of, I believe, I come to this job every day really believing that everybody can do it. How am I, as the adult, going to help them get there? I think that's broader than the ability challenge. That's hopefully where we can get, as a sector, and especially given our world today. I think we have to really double down on young people, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be answering all the questions that we can't answer.
Yeah. I think that there's so much, I still have so much hope with our youth, because they are listening and they are watching, and they know they do not like what they're seeing in many grown-ups these days. So Kristen, with that said, what trends are you seeing that are on your radar for special education?
And this really calls back to my earlier response in those areas that we see pretty consistently. So one, continuing to see this need to build teacher knowledge and skill around what it means to design and implement effective specialized instruction. That's our entry point to the conversation around Tier 1, because specialized instruction for students with disabilities is a Tier 1 thing.
Yes.
It's how you ensure I have access. And so continuing our work as an organization and partnering with schools and districts on not only the professional learning of it all, but the coaching. And that's coaching for school leaders, that's coaching for district leaders around understanding what inclusive instructional strategies look like in practice, and also helping see like the similarities between, like, you're already looking for these things. Let's talk about why they're so uniquely important for your students with disabilities. Also, in terms of the behavior trend that I named earlier, we still hear that. And so as an organization, we've done a lot of work around building professional learning and resources for folks to build their knowledge and skill and understanding the actual functions of behavior. We actually have some very cool resources, some functions of behavior cards that were created that give folks just some quick tools that they can use. Like, here's some example scenarios and some ways in which you can respond to those things. We have an exciting presentation coming up in a few months where we'll actually be able to share just that professional learning, those resources, and some of the results that we've seen from folks on understanding the function of behavior and how to really effectively meet the needs of your kids. And the last thing I'll say is around staffing. We actually recently did a panel in the fall, I think it was, on staffing shortages. And so collaborating with partners to reimagine how you approach staffing. So building some knowledge and skill, as well as some resources for how you plan for student rostering and scheduling with student needs at the center, and then how you bring your staff along and understand how you can get creative with staff allocation. So those are definitely 3 areas that are in the forefront of our minds, just as we look in the next chapter.
Well, I'm excited because that sounds like 3 more podcast episodes coming our way. That we, I think it's important that my listeners get to know you as an organization and what you believe. And so this was kind of our intro episode, I'll call it. And then I adore our thought partnership. I know we check in monthly just to say, how are you doing? Here are some resources to keep you going. And so I look forward to continuing and then truly coming back, because I know that people that hear this conversation will want to know so much more about the work you're doing and to also have the gift of you working with their school district. So I will make sure to put all of your contact details in the show notes as well. But I can't thank you both enough, because your work on behalf of children is seamless. It's so thoughtful. And Kristen, I'm going to borrow your word. It's so precise. And that's what we need to be. That's what our kids deserve. So thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for doing this amazing podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait for it to be out in the world next month. It's going to be amazing. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Schoolutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies is created, produced, and edited by me, Olivia Wall. Thank you to my older son, Benjamin, who created the music playing in the background. You can follow and listen to Schoolutions wherever you get your podcasts, or subscribe to never miss an episode and watch on YouTube. Thank you to my guests, Sarah Sindelius and Kristen Briggs, for sharing how the Ability Challenge supports organizations in designing intentional support systems for effective special education. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email at schoolutionspodcast@gmail.com. Let me know what resonated most with you from my conversation with Sarah and Kristen. Tune in every Monday for the best research-backed coaching and teaching strategies you can apply right away to better the lives of the children in your care. Stay tuned for my bonus episodes every Friday, where I'll reflect and share connections to what I learned from the guests that week. See you then.